excited to speak with Kelly Vess today, a seasoned speech and language pathologist who focuses on treating the whole child, not just, as she says, the mouth. Aside from being a pediatric speech language pathologist and an off-campus clinical supervisor, Kelly Vess is author of the recently released book, Speech Sound Disorders, Comprehensive Evaluation and Treatment. Kelly also presents the latest best practice intervention seminars for speechpathology.com and the Bureau of Education and Research. You can reliably find her at the American Speech, Language, and Hearing Association's annual conferences with best practice research for preschoolers, which is freely available on ResearchGate. Kelly's research is focused on achieving optimal gains in communication skills early on when neuroplasticity is high. Let's get started. Well, first, Kelly, we are honored to have you join us on the Brain Possible podcast. To start, can you talk a little bit about what drew you to this work and why you have such a heart for helping kids communicate? I always like to talk about the why before we jump into the how.
Okay, yeah. What I feel like is our time here in this world is short. And if I want to make the most out of the time here, I'm going to work with preschoolers with special needs, because at this level, we can create change. We can change these children's lives so that for the next 100 years, they have a totally different outcome. So the work we do, I think, is the most important work in the world that we're doing, because when we're working with children with special needs, especially before age 6, we can, and this is why your podcast is so important, we can rewire the brain. And I've worked with so many children with autism spectrum disorder who can't talk. And then today they're fully included, and here they are graduating, they're going on to college, they're fully included at the elementary level. And that's because at the preschool level, we did all the right things. So that's why I love your podcast and what you're talking about. You're not treating a mouth, you're not treating a brain, you're treating a child, and you're treating all aspects of the child to really create change. So it's kind of like when you go to the gym, you can do all the right things, but if you're going to go and eat McDonald's afterwards, you're not going to make gains. And what you do with the Brain Possible and what we're doing is we're saying, if you treat the whole child, you're going to create change. So that's why I do what I do. It's a mission.
So can you explain to our listeners why the timing is so important? You said before 6.
The research indicates that the neuroplasticity is greatest at this age. So what we can do with these children is, a lot of these children, unfortunately, let's take a step back, because a lot of the children we work with have movement disorders in the body. So a lot of our children, if they can't crawl, if they can't walk, they're not experiencing all of these experiences and all of these interactions with other people that create neuronal change, that create connections in the brain. So they're at a huge disadvantage at this age. So what our job is to do as professionals, when they're young, when you have millions per second of neuronal connections being formed by all of the new experiences, children who can walk and children who can crawl are experiencing, that a lot of children with special needs aren't. We have to come in and we have to provide those complex experiences for them. So that's why it's so important before age 6, because after age 6, the neuroplasticity, even though it's still there, it's at a much less level. And we know that children who don't talk by age 6, the odds of them talking is very low. So if I work with a child in preschool, it's a lot on your shoulders. This is very high stakes. And this child does not learn to talk. I can reliably expect to see them in high school. This is often the case at the same level they were in preschool, able to say only a couple of words. So this is very high stakes, what we're doing at the preschool level. It's very important because the neuroplasticity diminishes, even though it's still there after age 6, significantly.
Well, I hear that. I also hear lot of,
Yeah.
for everyone whose children are over the age of
Yeah, good.
6, a lot of like never to be's, which I'm not a fan of,
Yeah.
because if
Yeah.
someone hears that, what I know from personal experience and what I hear is that people might just believe or live into that negative context of, well, probably that now at this point, they'll never do that.
Great point. Great point. And there's children such as, I believe her name is Carly, who at age 26 learned to talk, and she was pre-verbal, and she's a genius. She has a over 130 IQ now that she can talk, and she's as brilliant as the most brilliant professors, and she learned at age 26 to talk.
Wow.
So yes, I love what you're saying. Never lose hope, and you can always make a difference. And we've looked at people that have strokes or brain damage that have a percentage of their brain intact, and they've had full recoveries. So yes, that is a great point that you're bringing. Never lose hope. You can always make a difference, but it's just at the preschool level, there's no time to waste.
Right.
There's no way to see. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And if I were to err, I don't want to err on being the person that sticks my head in the sand and takes a wait and see approach at this age. I want to, that's my only point, is no wasting time.
Right.
No wasting time.
Yeah. It's wonderful when people can start treatments and therapies as early as possible. I think one of the reasons that, now my son did not, he was only 20 months when he passed away, but one of the reasons that he was doing so well, and actually all of his therapists and people, our friends, and everyone was surprised when he passed away, I think was because he started treatment immediately after being discharged from the hospital. So he was like a month old or less. Yeah. And so we just did that immediately, and he didn't know anything else other than input. And so we were lucky. But some people, I've heard so many people say that what you just said, they've been, maybe you mentioned the wait and see approach. Gosh, I've heard a lot of people who are like, well, we didn't know what was wrong because we were told to just wait. And so then they didn't do anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
what you, I'm sorry, but really quickly, what you did is against most doctors' advice. Most doctors would say, let him rest.
Yeah.
And what you did is you knew that the brain was rebuilding and rewiring right now after the stroke. So he needs intervention right now. Yeah, he's been through a lot, but this, you had this wisdom that's beyond the medical field, because the medical field, many doctors, most of them would say, let him rest. And you said, okay, now it's time to rebuild the brain. That's what he needs to do right now. So that was wonderful that you did that. And then you saw miracles occur when he was here as a result.
Yeah. I just know that it was unusual. So most people, unfortunately, it doesn't happen that quickly.
Yeah.
So I want to still give hope to people, beyond that, no matter when they can get started, it's still good time. Our brain is changing so much, even until our 20s, right?
Yes.
Somewhere. Yeah. Okay. So talk a little bit about treating the whole child. I've heard you say that, and I love it. How do you do it? And why is that so core to your work, Kelly?
Oh, that's so important. Thank you for bringing this up. This is everything. When we work with children with special needs, a large majority of them have movement disorders in the body. So these are children that can't independently walk, that can't independently sit, that can't independently play. And we come in as speech pathologists and we say, I'm going to teach you to talk. I'm going to teach you to use gestures. I'm going to teach you sign language. Well, the problem is that children don't have wings. Children can't fly. And a lot of these children can't even get off the floor. So they haven't developed their core. They haven't developed their limbs. And we're asking them to do the highest level skill, which is speech and gestures, which comes last.
Yeah.
And they can't fly. And not only that, their auditory systems and their visual systems develop lastly. First, the core needs to develop, then the limbs need to develop, and then the auditory and visual systems. And what do? We say, I've got an idea. You can fly. You're going to work on speech, gestures, and you following my directions auditorily. And I'm going to bring out some flashcards or some visual, and you labeling what each picture is visually. So let's just ignore the fact you can't get off the floor, or let's just ignore the fact you can't independently walk across the room. And you're just, and then this is the worst part. When the children don't fly, they say, well, I think your child has a cognitive impairment. And the cognitive impairment lies in the intervention. So that's what I mean. And it's so, and you're bringing me to this point, and I'm going to tell you right now, for children with autism spectrum disorder, the research shows 80% of them have a significant motor impairment in their bodies. Yet they're no more likely to receive physical therapy or movement therapy. So these children, they're being grossly undertreated. It's just unethical. It's illogical. It's just totally wrong. And we know from the research, they really benefit from the physical therapy. So no one's coming in the form of bread for these children. They're not getting their needs met, but we're coming and saying, if they can't talk, if they can't use gestures, if they don't follow your directions or answer your questions, this is the worst. It's because they're not interested, in people. So that is total bunk. It's because they can't get off the floor and they're not receiving intervention for that. So I feel very, very strongly about that. The good news is that parents, speech pathologists, anyone can make a difference in movement and in their bodies, in these children's bodies. That's the good news. You don't need to be a physical therapist. You don't need to be an occupational therapist. You don't need to be a physiotherapist. You just need to know what to do. So that's the good news. But that you're bringing up, and that's why I love that you brought Annette Banyel's method on your website. And you brought that. A lot of people don't know about that method, about movement and the child development. And that's why it's so important that you have brought that to the masses with your website and with your podcast and saying, hey, a lot of people don't know about this, but this really matters.
So how do you support your clients with that?
This is a really important question. This is called task-oriented intervention. So I read research from every discipline, a lot like you, because you understand that you see one thing, but if you look at the whole picture, you're really going to get what you do. I think which is great in your website is you take the best from each field. And in the field of physical therapy and occupational therapy, the absolute best thing you can do is called task-oriented intervention, where you give the child a purpose, give the child a task, and step back and don't touch the child. And that's because children are brilliant. And children have a unique neuromuscular experience, and unique history, and unique body type and challenges that they're dealing with. And they know how to most efficiently use their body. Not the professionals, not the physical therapist with 1,000,000 degrees, not the parent, not the speech pathologist. The child is the expert. So what we do, this is the most effective thing to do, is you give the child something meaningful to work for. And then the child at a challenging, at the 80% level, challenging, not too challenging. And then the child is going to figure it out. They're going to use their body to the best degree, the most efficient method possible. And that's how they're going to grow. So I'll give you an example of that. Let's have a child be a farmer, and let's have the farm animals got loose, and he has to get the farm animals and bring them back to the farm. So you can have the child go across a balance beam, and the child might have to go against some Ganges rocks, some rocks that are put apart. What you're doing is you're developing their vestibular system, their proprioception, their motor system, their complex motor system. All of this we need for speech. All of this we need for gestures and communication. We're developing that. We're working on that. And the child's going to swoop down and pick up the cow off the floor from the Ganges, and he's going to go through this obstacle course and put it in the barn. That is a task-oriented intervention. We never touch the child. If I went over and held the child's hand on the balance beam when the child's 2, because that's cute, at age 5, what's going to happen? I'll be holding the child's hand on the balance beam, because my one finger is going to be doing the neuro programming and planning, programming, execution, cessation. I'm doing all the work with my finger out there. So we have to keep our hands off the child, and the child motivated to get that farm animal in that barn is going to use the body in the most efficient manner possible and therefore grow. So that is the best, and that is the best of the best that we can do, that we can take from the field of occupational therapy and physical therapy, is give them something meaningful and step back. Step back, don't touch them, don't touch them. And 20% of the time, the child's gonna fall, and that's okay, because that's how they're gonna learn. They're gonna get up and do it again. So, but that's what good therapy looks like. And people can't say, well, you shouldn't be doing that because that's physical therapy, that's occupational therapy. And I'm saying, I'm not touching the child. So what are you going to sue me for creating educationally rich activities? So you're going to see an example of that in the digital clip that you have for your audiences, where it's a camper and she's gathering materials and she's challenged and she's figuring it out herself.
Well, I love that.
Yes.
I think it's like a complementary thing, though, because at the same point, which I think you already said, but I wanted to reiterate, like there is so much importance when you're talking about like treating the whole child. There's many parts to treating a whole child. And for many kids, they maybe do need help with patterning, and their body's not going to get there alone. And so you even doing the movements for them is still creating one pattern at a time in their brain. Now, I know that you need thousands of them to do that one movement thousands of times. But I just want to, make sure that our listeners also know that that work is super important as well. But I love this. It's called what did you call it?
It's called task-oriented intervention. So you could even say task-based. It's based on task-based. Task-based intervention. And it might not seem like rocket science, but it is.
Yeah, so it's just helping to develop. It's just to me, that's like another piece of the pie of treating the whole child.
And I love what you brought up too. Hand over hand is the most effective prompt for teaching a motor skill. So when I want to teach children how to cue, you're going to see in the video, the child's cueing her speech with her hands and her fingers. I'm going hand over hand on that part, because that's like you said, that's a very complex motor skill with the fingers and the arms, or sign language, for instance, teaching sign language. I'm going to go hand over hand, and that's the most effective thing to do. And then fade out. And like you said, with lots of repetition, create automaticity. Because if I told the girl, okay, do this, her imitation neurons, her mirror neurons are damaged. So it's like, oh, thanks, that really helps.
Yeah.
So I love that you brought that up. And a lot of my graduate students are like, well, you're supposed to keep your hands off the children. You're supposed to and it's like, no, get your hands on the children. So I agree with you. There's times, get your hands on the children and then fade them off to teach these complex motor skills. I'm glad you brought that up. And and the research says that's the most effective thing you could do if you're teaching a new skill. This is a little bit different. It's more of a gross motor, task-oriented intervention in which the child and the neat thing is like, if you've ever been to a physical therapist, right?
Mhm.
You might have a bodybuilder behind you, and you might have a senior citizen in front of you that
Yeah.
is going through rehab. It's going to be the same activity, and the physical therapist is just going to adjust the weights, going to adjust some things to make it individualize it for each child. So I use the same activity with all of my preschoolers. I work with the most severely impaired preschoolers you imaginable. And I also work with children that just have problems with the R sound in preschool. All of them get the same activity. I just, as you were saying, I just alter it to make them independently successful at an 80% level.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's just like a physical therapist would do. Okay, my next client, I've got to change this, this, and that so they can do it. So, but all of everyone gets an educationally rich activity. Everyone
Mhm.
gets a task at the end, but some of them are going to have to go through hurdles, and some of them are simply going to have to walk from one spot to the next or crawl from one spot to the next. So,
Do you ever,
mm-hmm.
so I'm thinking about, like, for someone like my son, he never got to, ever, we were trying to form words or anything, but
Yes.
he did work with a speech there. I'm remembering he did work with a speech pathologist for a little while on occasion, who was also an Anat Ben-Yael method practitioner.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And I remember she used to work in his mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And she helped him with learning to, like, move his tongue and be able to have the proper posture so that he could then swallow. And all of that kind of also plays into what you're doing as well. Do you do anything like that?
Yes, I love what you're mentioning here. There's 3 secrets to success at the preschool level. And the first is challenging treatment targets, which we
Okay.
haven't talked about yet. The second is what you're talking about right now, is using a multimodal approach, in which she's using touch to show him. I think she might have been using prompt or something of that matter. She's using touch to show him what to do with his tongue, what to do with his mouth, instead of saying, oh, do this. Now you do this, and using
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So that what you're talking about is extremely important. That's the second secret to success. Oftentimes in our field, people are just like, say bye-bye, say in, say out, say bubbles.
Yes. Yes.
And yeah, and it's like, oh, if that worked, I would be speaking in paragraphs, because people talk to me all day, right? The problem is many children with special needs have damage in what is known as the cerebellum, which is where you perceive language and where you produce it.
Mm.
So we need to use, as your speech pathologist was doing, a multimodal approach. What I use, and you'll see this in the video, is we use our fingers and we use our arms to say sounds. So as you're going to see in the video, if it's an S sound, we're going to make a snake with our finger and our arm, and a pointed finger going round and round and round for a very long time. But what are we doing in the brain when we do that is, in your cerebellum, which is where we produce speech, you produce finger movements in the front of the anterior cerebellum, then tongue and speech movements,
Oh, okay.
and then arm movements. Now I know this might sound complex. I'll try to make it really simple.
Okay.
All right, so in the back of our brains, we have the cerebellum, which is little peach, all of us does, and 90% of the neuronal activity occurs there, and it attaches to every area of the brain. It's everything. It's the CEO of the brain. It's everything, and that's what we're targeting in therapy. But in that anterior cerebellum, you have 3 things. You have 3 things going on. In the front of it, you have finger movement. In the middle, you have speech movement, and in the back, you have limb movement. So if we want these children to talk, which we do, we want their arms moving and their fingers moving. And when we do that, we light that cerebellum up like a light bulb. It's stimulated, it's blunt. And then what's going to happen? The tongue's going to move. And that's because that area of the brain is stimulated. So my superpower, what I like to do is teach children with autism who can't talk to talk. And that's my secret. That's my secret sauce. is I have them move their limbs. So if they're saying the S, they're moving their arm, they're moving their fingers, and guess what? Out comes the voice.
Mm-hmm.
So it's so funny because if I don't have the fingers going as well,
Yeah.
no voice, no voice.
Wow. It's fascinating.
Yeah. So that's huge. Movement is huge, but that's multimodal. I'm going to teach you to talk, and we're going to use our whole body. And I always tell my graduate students, pretend that your client is the row ZZ balcony seat, back row. You've got to cut through all of that static because, and as Annette Baniel would say, they're taking it all in. Our children with special needs are taking everything in. You want them to take in the speech.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to cut through all of that and get to row ZZ on the balcony seat. So that's make that speech big, make it loud, make it long, cut through all the static, and have the child doing it with their limbs. So it's two ways. Mm-hmm. So externally, I am putting it in their face. I am like cutting through all the static. Your speech is going to cut through all of it. Internally, their brain is lit up like a light bulb, their cerebellum, because they're moving their fingers, they're moving their limbs, and guess what? Speech comes to. But it's really funny because, like I said, if you don't have the fingers moving and they're just moving limbs, no speech.
How interesting.
Yeah, yes. So.
And that's just at first, right? Until they kind of start to master it and then they can integrate.
Yeah.
I love how you would say it.
Yes. Okay. So I work with a lot of children that can't talk and people are like, well, how do you get them to vocalize? You know, I've tried this and having bubbles pop. And I'm like, no, if you want to get them to vocalize, have them move their arms and their fingers. And at first, like you said, it's hand over hand. And then I get my hands off of them. And then the speech comes as well.
Wow.
And then, so then after that, I move to the next level. I start at the sentence level. We don't speak in one word utterances. Speech is a continuous motor act. And it's not beneficial. This one word stuff, you know, dog, go, this caveman speech, I don't know what to call it. The research is quite clear. After 7 months of age, children benefit from saying sentences because there's a rhythm to it. There's a rhythm. Speech is continuous. It's a continuous motor movement. It's as if someone taught you a golf swing and taught you every 1 inch of the golf, swing once at a time. Golf is a continuous motor movement. So is speech. So you don't teach it like chop, chop, chop. Yeah. That's not speech. And the research shows that's not beneficial for children. Teach them speech if you want them to talk. Don't teach them chop, 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 chop. Yeah.
Okay, so what advice would you give to parents out there listening who are concerned that their young child might be struggling with age-appropriate communication? Where do they start? And kind of to piggyback that question, I also have been sitting here wondering, well, just like any practice, there's really great speech pathologists, and then there's ones who maybe, they're basic, or, they have the degree, but they're not really thinking about the whole child like this. So what would you say to parents? How do they try and find the right speech pathologist for their child? Do they interview them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that it takes 8 weeks to see results, the research does, and give the person an 8-week try. And if you find in 8 weeks, you're seeing great results like you did with cardio, whoa, I'm a believer because look at the gains that this child's making. It's amazing from session to session. We're doing all the things. But I would agree with you. And I think that there's also a fit. Like if you like someone who does flashcards with your child, I'm not the speech therapist for you. But I can tell you the person next door is, so I agree with you. It's so complex. It's like a relationship. Who's the guy that's like a total 10 for one person is a total 1 dud for another. It's the same way when it comes to selecting a therapist. I would look for, if you have a child with significant disabilities and I'm saying you can create change. We've worked with so many children who are pre-verbal and they are fully included today in elementary school, losing their labels, even going that far. And that's because we did all the right things in preschool. So what I agree with you, I would look for 3 things. If you have a child with significant impairment, 1, are they giving them challenging treatment targets? Okay. 2, are they using, as you said, multimodal forms of communication? Are they just saying, say this, say that? Oh, it's not working. I don't know what's wrong with your child. 3, if there's a movement issue, are they incorporating movement? And if I had a child with significant impairment, if I wasn't seeing these 3 things, I mean, let's talk about the treatment target. If they're doing really simple treatment targets, like your child's not going anywhere. Challenge creates change, easy doesn't. And I'm just going to use an analogy here because this is so important. I had a friend and her mother was morbidly obese and she had type 2 diabetes and she had already lost her vision. She had already lost use of her limbs and because her blood was thick with sugar, right? And the doctors said, you're a millimeter close to a coma, okay? And they said, this is the diet I recommend for you. And they said, no more than 20 grams of carbohydrates, only lean protein, lean vegetables, and healthy fats. That's it. Nothing more. Nope. And that diet they recommended for this morbidly obese lady was the same that a supermodel would be on in Fashion Week, correct? This is challenge creates change. And that's the way we have to look at our intervention at the preschool level. We can't waste time. And the stakes are life. This is for life stakes, what we do at the preschool level. So we have to give them, these are the ones that really need the challenging treatment targets. So that's very important. I can give your child easy and the child's happy, I'm happy, no one's being pushed. And the doctor could have told the lady, I want you to eat half a cheeseburger and half that as fries that you're eating and save the rest for dessert. And she would end up in a coma. So I think that we need to look at preschool level intervention, early intervention the same way. Don't give these children second-rate therapy. Give them top shelf, complex treatment targets. And as you said, using a multimodal approach. And that's what you're going to see in the video. You can do complex, but we're going to be moving our limbs. We'll be moving our fingers. We'll be moving our arms to get you there. But yeah, but that's how I think about early intervention is that, and it's the same way if you think of those extreme weight loss, Biggest Loser. I don't even know if it's on anymore.
I remember that. Yeah.
But they're not saying, oh, you're 800 pounds, so we're going to put you on a 3,000 calorie diet because normally you're on an 8,000 calorie diet. They're saying, hey, we're putting you on a 1,500 calorie diet, and here's a tractor wheel, you're going to run up that hill. Because challenge creates change. And this is high stakes. This is life or death. But we need to have that same level of urgency with the preschoolers we work with. Challenge creates change. I'm going to give you challenging targets to rewire your brain when neuroplasticity is at the greatest level, and we can do it. But I like what you said, and it does diminish over time, so it's critical.
Yeah.
It's life or death. Yeah.
I love that. So, where do people start? I mean, if people might be thinking, "Gosh, I think my kid might need speech."
Oh, thank you. I would say immediately go for that evaluation, call that local school for that evaluation, get the wheels rolling. And suppose, like you said, what if I get the therapist, they're like, wah, wah, therapist, at least look at it as tutoring. At least it's something. There's an additive effect. And then as you have done, you can say, all right, I need something more. I need something different, but at least I opened the door and I got started.
How has virtual been for you? I'm sure you're in person again now, but actually I have twins who were going to speech and they did virtual speech during parts of last year.
That's a great question because I'm actually very concerned about teletherapy and virtual
I was
speech.
kind of wondering that while we're
Yeah.
sitting here, because I mean, that's more just like say this, say that, because how much more can you do virtually?
I love that question because this is very, very important. When I'll give you my own personal experience in teletherapy. The first day, I'm like, I'm just going to do what I do in normal speech, and it's through a screen because I'm so fun. What could possibly go wrong? And of course, like, here's Miss Kelly with all of Miss Kelly's toys. Oh, I know you can't play with them, but you get to watch me play with them. How's that? That's called observational learning. It's extremely hard. I mean, even if you're watching Mark Robar do science on TV, it's still hard because you're not making, swimming in the jello or whatever. And so, of course, what do you think the child's doing? The child's running out of the room under the chair. Could you get up? Let's try. All right, so then I went in the other direction and I got all of these speech games, all these .com subscriptions. Okay, we're gonna play these speech games. I felt like a casino I felt like a dealer in a casino. And it was bells, whistles, as you said, save spoon 5 times, ding, 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 ding. All right, so that is not, and that's the problem. That is a lot of what I'm seeing in teletherapy because I've subscribed to 10 subscriptions and being who I am, and did a 180 in that direction. And that lasted a day because I knew this was wrong. This is wrong, 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 wrong. And I don't know, I don't know what we're teaching the children, but I would have been much better if the child was outside playing than in speech therapy with me for that day. So then I changed my approach, but thank you for mentioning that, in which I do use some technology, but I use it in an interactive manner. And it's no bells and whistles, but I use some technology, and then I use movement activities, songs, and we do movements together. But I vary them. But I agree with you. We have to be concerned, and I mean very concerned. And what bothers me is that we don't have any standards or rules.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense. So
yeah,
someone can go, and bill that and play a video game with the child. And the speech pathologist, they're just a dealer at a casino. They're pressing the button, ding, 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 and they're dealing the card, ding, 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 ding. And then they can go and bill hundreds of dollars for that. And I don't know if that makes the child better or worse, that experience. So I'm very concerned about teletherapy. I will tell you that I found a way to make it real. I had to fail in one direction, going to all natural. And I had to fail in the other direction and being a dealer in a casino. And I did find in the middle, I could be natural, but I did have to insert bits of technology for variety purposes in a manner. But thanks for asking that very important question.
I don't know how you do it with little children, though. I mean, they can't, maybe they're not going to imitate your movements, or if they have a damage in their motor area of their brain.
That's a great point, because I work with children with autism spectrum disorder with preschoolers. That's my specialty. And for children like that, what I did is I did play little clips of their favorite animated Hungry Caterpillar book or something like that. Very Hungry Caterpillar. Stopped it. And then they did the sentence strip, look at reading books. And then we played more. So it had to be more tech when it came to these children. But I think you bring out a very important point, because I think those children benefit less. Would you agree with that, from teletherapy?
Right.
These
the younger or motor issues. Yeah.
Yeah. These children that don't have the foundational skills, and you're putting them through a computer to do therapy, those are the ones that I think are the worst candidates for teletherapy. So I'm glad that you're asking these important questions. Because COVID changed therapy. You're going to see a lot more teletherapy, and there's no regulations on it.
Yeah.
On what the therapist is going to do.
Yeah, it's sad.
Yeah.
I think the ball's been dropped there. And I think a lot of these children and how important it is, that's been dismissed, I suppose. But I have heard good stories where, I think I interviewed someone and a mom, and she said that the school did open just for the special needs class. Now, that was wonderful that school did, but that's not the norm.
I'm glad you bring it up, because those, I think, were the greatest victims of COVID, were the children that you're mentioning with pervasive needs, that had autism spectrum disorder, that had pervasive developmental disorders. And what is it, for almost a 2-year period?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In this critical time when they're like getting work done, all of a sudden they have to stop. But
the greatest victims, I think, of the COVID crisis, perhaps. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, man, makes me sad for so many people. But I think that at the very least, hopefully people, I say this and I'm like, well, hopefully people have been able to get more family time or learn to slow down more. But I know if the parents are working, that's very difficult as well. Okay, well, so Kelly, where can people find out more about you and your work? And do you only work with people in your regional area, or do you work with people in other states as well?
Yeah. I don't do any private practice whatsoever, but I do have a book out that is amazing, and it would be very useful for all parents. It's called Speech Sound Disorders: Comprehensive Evaluation and Treatment. And really, it's about how to treat the total child at the preschool level. And it has 100 digital clips to illustrate how you do these strategies that are really, really powerful. And it's written in plain English. The way I look at the book is it's a mastermind, because I show you these are the strategies that really, really make a difference. We've done the research. This really, really matters. And what the parent does, I know that the parent has her own strategies, or he has his own strategies and knows his child. And what the book does is the book says, okay, look at these strategies, and then it's guided practice. How would you do this better? How would you do this differently? So the book is about two minds coming together to create a third mind, which is even better practice. Because parents, as you know, parents bring a lot to the table. And what I love about your website and your mission is you're saying, I'm going to give you the best of everything out there, and you take what works for your child and mix it together eclectically and make it better.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And by no means should someone look at our website and think, gosh, do I do all of this? Because no one should do all of it. But just exactly what you said, just know that it exists, read through it, and find what works for your family.
Yeah. And like, I like your website because I encourage people to approach it like a buffet, because what I've found is every single canned approach out there, I see obvious strengths and obvious weaknesses, where it's like they have this, which is highly effective, but they have this technique, which is highly ineffective. So I think every single approach you look at, treat it like a buffet and say, this is a great strategy, and this is a great strategy.
Yeah.
The best way to go.
And then you have some videos too, right?
Yes. So in the book, there's 100 videos for you to watch that are best practices. And the children are very, very severely impaired. And it shows how do you teach children with a very severe level impairment how to talk. And it also goes to children that just have problems with the R's and L's and their S sounds. And what do you do with these children, and everything in between? So within the book, there's 100 videos. And I shared with you and your viewers one of the videos to show how do we incorporate movement and complex treatment targets at the preschool level to get huge gains. It's kind of like, how do you do Biggest Loser with preschoolers?
Yeah.
Basically what it is what the videos are.
Perfect. Well, we will have the video, and I think it was a worksheet, some links for you and your work on our blog. and
Okay.
on the podcast page. Well, if you're listening, please visit thebrainpossible.com and check out this podcast to find all the links. Okay, so Kelly, my last question I want to ask is there anything else that you would like to share with the Brain Possible community today to be complete?
I think that's about it. I think that we covered it really, really well. It was a great interview. I think I asked extremely important questions right now.
Perfect. I think you're the first person who's ever said that to me.
No,
I mean that there's nothing else. Everyone always comes up with some kind of thing, which is interesting. But I guess that's great. You feel complete.
Yeah, I think that you asked all of the important questions. And I think that I love that you mentioned teletherapy, because right now, for instance, I had like 7 subscriptions for a day. I was like, what is everyone doing? And my district, for instance, they paid for every speech pathologist to have those subscriptions. And it's garbage. It's total garbage.
I know. I've bought a few of them. I mean, as you know, for my twins, and they did some games and stuff. But I know it's not the whole child approach.
Yeah, it's really scary because COVID changed things in which there's going to be a lot more teletherapy. I did do research, and we made huge gains in teletherapy. And I'm glad you brought that up, but not with the children with severe impairment. With the children with mild to moderate impairment, we did, but we didn't do video games with them through teletherapy. But a lot
of movement.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, if you get it, if it's done right, you can make great gains. But I was just like, this should not be billed. Children shouldn't be doing this. Preschoolers shouldn't be doing this. So yeah, keep up the amazing work you're doing. I love your website. I was like, I'll spread the word on your website. I couldn't believe when I read about keto and I mean, that's cutting edge and brain injury.
Well, actually, it's old. It's old.
Oh.
But I think it's become popular again. So now people think that, because before there was prescription medication, that is what was recommended. That was what doctors told people to do for their children.
Yeah. So keep doing what you're doing. It's really making a huge difference what you're doing. And I just love your podcast. Just keep doing what you're doing. I know it's hard work, but it is. And sometimes, like I said last time, I we have thousands of people visiting our site, and I don't know them and I don't hear from them. And so I love whenever people do write in and share their story. Yeah, your site is so important. Just keep doing what you're doing, and I think it's so important because I know that about Carter's legacy. I heard about that, but you're really you're making the most out of his life by what you're doing. You're changing millions. You're going to change millions of lives. It's going to take time, but you're going to change millions of lives with what you're doing. So that's
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for my daily dose of encouragement.
I'm the world's most honest person. So your website really kind of sucks if it did, but I'm like, this is good.
Where did you find it?
Keep up the great work. I saw you on Instagram, and I was like, these are great posts. And I saw you on Instagram, and I was just like, oh, she's talking about really important stuff about the diet and I was looking at lots of posts of yours, and I listened to the Raising Lions.
Yeah, that was a good interview.
Yeah. And so, and I love what he said about not using, and I love that he was like, don't use medication. I mean, that was a big, claim, and this is what you do instead. And I think that his interview was about what he brought home was really boundaries. Boundaries are so important.
I try to do what he does. And I have 4 living kids, and it's, I know, and it's wild. And I try to, slow down and remember what I learn on these podcasts from interviewing these experts on being mindful, and then using his method of not doing timeouts, but instead doing breaks and stuff. but I tend to slip in, but it's just a habit. Have to keep using those muscles and tools to make them habits with the kids.
Yeah, one thing you said that was really interesting to me, having a 10-year-old, was about when you give, I mean, okay, there was different rules, because what you do if you do with a 3-year-old, if you say it's time for a break,
Mhm.
I mean, no, they're not going to know why, but I mean, but with a 10-year-old, I loved what he said, because I talked to him like, it's time for a break because, you know what I mean?
Oh,
Yeah, I don't know
yes.
if you do that. And I'm thinking,
Yes.
I get it, where he's just like, you got to think about this yourself.
Yeah. Did you read the book?
I did read the book after your podcast. It was a great podcast. I read the book, and like I said, I thought the book applied more to school age, because
Mhm.
preschool age, they don't have metacognitive skills yet, so they can't think about their performance and evaluate their performance at that age yet. So let me give you an example. If you say a word incorrectly, and if you're a preschooler and I don't give you a response, that doesn't help you.
Mhm.
It doesn't, because you don't have metacognitive skills. So,
Right. And
yeah, it's better if I respond.
I
Huh?
used to not correct my twins because, I thought it was cute that they said things, when they would be
Yeah.
like, I don't know, whatever they said, but there was, they would just say things wrong. And I thought it was so cute until it was like their pre-K teacher said, now they need speech. And I was like, oh, I guess I should have been correcting them all along.
Yeah, they don't have that skill level yet, but his technique with elementary age is like, I mean, with 5-year-olds and above is like, is saying,
Yeah. That's
think
where
about
he primarily works, was in schools, it sounds like.
yeah. So that was great. But yeah, if you've had twins, you can take anything on. Were they twin boys? No.
No, I have twin
Okay.
girls. They're
Oh,
6.
yeah, it's easy. Okay.
Yeah. I do have a 4-year-old boy. He is a
Oh,
handful.
awesome.
He's the
Awesome.
one who needs the breaks all the time.
Oh, okay. That's good. Well, keep doing your amazing work. Thank you so much for what you do.
And thank
Okay.
you for your flexibility. And
Oh, of
we
course. It was
made
great
it
to have
work.
you during a vacation. All right. Well, have a great day.
And enjoy your travels. I hope that you enjoyed our conversation today and that you learned something new. Do you have a question for Kelly? Do you have your own story to share? I would love to hear from you. Let us know how we can be useful in your journey. Email us at info@thebrainpossible.com. Be sure to subscribe, follow, and share our podcast if that feels true for you. You may also consider visiting our website, thebrainpossible.com, for more information on stories, therapies, and products that we think that you will love. As always, thank you for spending your precious time with us at The Brain Possible. See you next week, and be well.